Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain. So,
I'm Ayo Makinde. Good morning. It's a beautiful Thursday morning. Welcome to the show.
Indeed, and we're grateful for clement weather. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily on Channels Television. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
Well, quite interesting to see that lots of, we got quite a number of recommendations, and rightly so, and concerns too about police, the functions, trying to ensure that robbery, which we did highlight in the opening sequence yesterday, concerning how the police authorities can perhaps take it a notch further in ensuring that the residents are a lot more protected when it comes to fighting terrorism. Well, preventing robbery in different parts of the country. So many recommendations, but I think some of them did hit at the heart of the structure of policing in the country. They just wonder when we will go ahead and hit the nail on the head as to what exactly and why is it that different states have one form of policing or the other. But we just will not talk about what we need to do to address policing. For instance, we know that there's a new police act, but how many even reference that in terms of carrying out certain functions? But today we hope to see that that role, that cooperation amongst agencies, which is a major part of what's been highlighted. So it's something that we'll look to see how that will eventually play out. And by the way, the CDS's office, they did respond concerning making clarifications as to that arrest, the way it was announced yesterday, because we did point out that it was a bit confusing. So they shed a lot of light on that as well.
And I think that's actually cheering. Excuse me. It's cheering that, the defense headquarters came out to say, look, this is the way it is. It's not, no confusion about it. This fellow, and, just the necessary clarifications made. But back to the police thing that you talked about. I find it very interesting that we have some laws in this country that dealt with everything. As in, everything is dealt with. If only we'll execute those laws to the letter. Everything is taken care of. You just cited the new Police Act. One of the things that I find very interesting about it is, well, it's said that, that law captures the welfare of the police. If only we would execute to the letter. Secondly, we are signatories to how many conventions in this universe? And one of them most certainly says that, recommends the ratio of police to citizens. If only we would look at that. Before we sign, can we implement? And then that will probably help us take control of take care of the problem.
I think it was in 2017, former Inspector General of Police, I think Ibrahim Idris, who said we needed about 155,000 more policemen to meet up with that. At that time, to meet up with that UN recommended ratio. I think about 1 to 400, because at the moment we've got about 300,000 policemen for a population of 200 million plus. So that definitely cannot meet the target, and they thought something had to be done to boost that.
And there are easy ways around this thing. The states, the chief, what do we call the governor? The chief security officer of the state had to be sent back by the president to go take care of your problems. And that was reported in 2021, just last year, when the governor, President had he told 2 governors to go back and take care of their problems. Fine. So it is something that they can do. Guaranteed, granted, all of that. But are they empowered by law to do that? In what space in the Constitution are they permitted to run a police system by themselves, do the things that they need to do to ensure that the people are well policed? Thirdly, is the role that local governments performed before. You heard, was it Dr. Yarino on Tuesday, or who were we speaking with? I was referencing the First Republic. In the First Republic, we had gradations, you know this, gradations of the policing system. The federal police, the state police, the constabulary, the local government police, we had them. We don't even have a local government anymore. So when we're talking about, Chimale, when we're talking about policing the country, do we really want to do it? Because the way people look at these things, you talked about robberies, for God's sake. This thing isn't supposed to be hard and fast. It's not supposed to be rocket science. The Lagos-Ibadan Expressway that we cited, which day was it, is under a particular local government. So where are the people that could have done anything? Who are the people that could have done anything? People protect themselves. The JTF, the JTF in the north that happened, it was in the northeast. It was the initiative of the people. So people can protect themselves. Are they empowered to do these things? We have amazingly beautiful laws in this country, but do we really want to implement them?
Amazing laws, but laws only in letter, not necessarily in spirit. It's interesting that, and heartwarming that the Chief of Defense Staff clarified the statement yesterday. But it also speaks to the heart of interagency collaboration. He says a lot about how perhaps the agencies have not reconciled their accounts on the arrests that have been made. If we go back yet again to Amotekun's announcement earlier in late June that they had made some arrests. Also, don't forget that the governor of Ondo State spoke 2 days ago as well, at about the same time that the Chief of Defense Staff was briefing, and said that some arrests were made. He confirmed it and said 5 arrests had actually been made, and that the owner of the house that hosted the terrorists has also been arrested. So if the Chief of Defense Staff is clarifying that only 1 arrest has been made, so there's still a lot to be said about who exactly was arrested, how many arrests have been made in total. Now we're talking about policing, which is at the heart of an interagency collaboration, which is at the heart of this conversation. We talked yesterday about the expressway, where we've had attacks during traffic congestion. It's sensitive information, but then again, it's very, very important for the police to give an inventory, perhaps at the level of, the Security Council meeting at the state level, of how much, what's the number of personnel, what's the size of personnel that they have. Then what about all the other security agencies? Isn't this the time that they need to begin to collaborate for effective policing? If we have 300,000 policemen, for instance, across the nation, what about the neighborhood watches that we have? What about the NSCDC? This is the time that they should collaborate for effective policing to curtail internal resurrection. We can't talk enough about that. It's not enough for the police to be. The police cannot, curtail internal insurrection alone as it is on their own right now, and that's why we have situations where security agencies are overwhelmed. It's time for them to begin to work together, so to speak.
I wonder, has anybody seen the counterterrorism officials?
Based
the
on
one set up by the law?
By the law of 2011, reviewed in 2013, and reviewed again in 2022.
That's right.
Have we... Let me not even say anything. Because, it's set up in 2011, or was it 2013, when the center was actually set up. The question you want to ask is, if that was anything, I talked about us having amazing laws. And if you look at that that terrorism prevention and prohibition law, you find very, very copiously written things that can be done to make sure we don't even smell terrorism in this country. With that center in particular, the question you want to ask is, how many years down the line now? Almost 10 years down the line now, or plus or minus 10 years down the line now. How far so far with that? I think maybe we need to actually review the functions of agencies set up by law.
Well, so since the laws are there, what is the problem then? Those are part of what we intend to find out in the course of the program here today. But in the meantime, we'll come back to you with a look at some of the dailies today. Welcome back. Let's take you through some of the dailies. We'll start with Nigerian Tribune first, and they lead with politics this morning. Fear grips PDP leaders over worsening Atiku Wike's feud. Yeah, they've set up a reconciliation committee to sort some of things out, but yet you see this. Look at the writers, by the way. Rivers governor's sacrifices made PDP strong opposition party. Mimiko.
You know, I can't get out of my head when you read that. I can't get out of my head a video making the rounds of the governor of River State. You know, was he yesterday at the commissioning? I was dancing and singing that song.
Well. What you know, the PS though, who knows? Remember those meetings that were postponed by the party? Now, it's at the NEC meeting, what's happening to it? The BOT meetings, what's happening to all of those? So they thought, well, we'll just need to do certain things, but there is a lot going on behind the scenes concerning this reconciliation move. Of course, there'll be lots of speculations, but some of those headlines too are just trying to send messages. I mean, yesterday there was that beat about different groups who they say were lieutenants of the governor, and so certain thoughts coming through from there were pointing to a certain direction in terms of what to expect. Now, the other question is, how long can they afford to let this feud last? Such that if they don't address these concerns in good time, each person may just say, to your tent, O Israel. And then
when
they
you're
go
a
like
beautiful
that.
bride, you must dance. Don't you think? Don't you agree, Ayo?
Well, you need to be a bride first.
Well, it looks like somebody is a bride in the PDP right now, and the bride is taking full advantage of the attention.
While I fear to personalize the issues, I think we need to, I don't know if opposition politics in Nigeria was ever a thing, or maybe it is still, could still be a thing. Because, I mean, if opposition parties played their roles the way they ought to play it, individuals may not be as strong.
Well, look at this, above this lead story. Buhari reverses approval for Seplat to buy ExxonMobil shares, supports NUPRC. You surprised?
Surprised?
That
Reverses
memorandum
approval.
seemed to have gone far, well, before this time.
Yeah,
So
way before this time. Almost immediately, in fact.
Yeah.
And then people thought, what's going on here? I mean, how come you approved it and then all of a sudden you withdraw it? But this is having some ripple effect.
It definitely
behind
will
the
have
scenes
ripple effects.
in terms of what exactly.
Aren't we talking about the
is
oil
this
sector
all
in Nigeria?
There you go. That is it.
This raises questions as to the powers of the president to superimpose his own regulation over the regulatory powers of the authority that should have regulated that process.
A lot of rumblings in that sector, in the oil sector. And then, unfortunately, this was heartbreaking when many people heard it. It appears to be taking different dimensions. Much as you see bandits abduct Ango Abdullahi's daughter-in-law for 4 grandchildren in Kaduna. So, excuse me, it just leaves people asking questions as to, look, how do these things keep happening? Yesterday was equally cherry. Before this recent abduction was the image of additional kidnapped members of that Kaduna train. They were kidnapped on March 28th. Family members released, 4 of them, several of my family members, including the couple. And then that's what you see here, but it's still a very, very big question as to what really is going on. How do we stem the tide? So you can catch all of those headlines on the front page of Tribune today.
The Vanguard newspaper is not too far from the lead story of the Tribune this morning. Tension in PDP as crisis worsens. Elders weigh options. Stories on page 5. Check out the riders. Campaign council to be unveiled within 2 weeks in Abuja. Substantial progress is being made, according to Atiku's camp. Will resolve crisis soon, PDP leader. Ayu should resign honorably, scribed to Bode George. Urges Wike not to jump ship. And Mimiko, former governor of the state, says, Wike, one man balancing force. The details you find on the inside pages. Of course, that story we also referenced this morning. Drama as motorists, commuters chase traffic robbers on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. You know, people defending themselves now. Stories on page 6 of the paper. And a number of other stories you'll find very interesting this morning. Mr. and Mrs. this morning is something you should look at yourself. Mrs. and Mr. talking, and there's someone talking about pay before service. I'll let you do this. You can choose yourself.
And from there, let's take a very quick look.
You want to look at it yourself.
Okay, let's take a very quick look at the Daily Trust newspapers this morning, and it has an interesting lead story. And it goes thus: Muslim ticket. Pope not against my Tinubu's campaign DG offer. That's attributed to the governor of Plateau State, Governor Simon Lalong. And recall that was it late last week now, we heard that announcement that he, alongside some other party officials, party members, had been appointed into the campaign team. So he's saying Pope not against his Tinubu campaign DG offer. Where the Pope comes in, well, I really do not understand. You'll have to find out from the Daily Trust newspapers this morning. But let's take a very quick look at the riders. Says Shatima's selection, not a religious affair. Obi supporters defaming me. That's attributed to the presidential candidate of the APC. And the last rider here says, it's not true, LP presidential candidate, Mr. Peter Obi. Well, that's it from the big story, and all of that you find, let's see now, on page 2 of the Daily Trust newspapers. Also, let's look at the bottom corner of the paper. 2023, Sultan can sign pact to de-escalate religious tension. Well, way to go amid, the religious crisis, well, maybe not of that proportion, but tension that we have, particularly in the north, also arising from the Muslim ticket. That's been the crux of the conversation for quite some time. And that's it from the Daily Trust newspapers this morning.
Well, on to The Guardian next. Presidency, turn of South despite religion, Akeredolu insists. Lalong, Pope hasn't opposed my DG appointment. Proud to lead APC's Muslim ticket campaign as a Catholic. Does Pope usually weigh into this kind of things? I'm not Catholic, I should have asked Mark, but this kind of things usually happen, I don't know. Resign as VP candidate to save APC from embarrassing defeat. Middle Belt Congress tells Shatima. Lalong's appointment as Tinubu campaign DG, political miscalculation, says group. So apparently this keeps going on. When you thought it's died down, it comes up again. But you can imagine when campaign starts properly, it will be there for a while. Who knows? And so that's what you see there. PDP party elders move to constitute campaign team, seek patience to end crisis. So I did tell you, how long were they willing to wait? Because part of the consideration was they might have needed to sort this out before setting up a campaign team. But if they go ahead and set up a campaign team, remember those regulations and requirements and conditions that were stipulated, been stipulated by the camp of the Rivers governor that was published in the dailies, and then the response from the party chairman's group that was equally published. So how did they reconcile it? Then subsequent setting up of that committee to see how they can iron out those issues. So were they supposed to have waited for that committee to finish the job before coming up with the committee? How long do they have? So,
well,
so there
Chamberlain,
you go.
you already analyzed for them, so I guess they have their job cut out.
Wow. So that's...
Has the Pope become an active part of Nigerian politics? Well, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that this morning.
Politicians will give you any analogy to justify their point, so that's the way it goes.
This Nigeria has this one on its front page. A report on phone importation reveals Nigeria spends 983.93 billion naira in 3 years on phone importation. By the way, that's what it means. China, Hong Kong, Sweden, others lead in foreign imports. Yep, that's what you have as lead. Story itself is on page 15 of this Nigerian newspaper. That's quite a lot of importation. Wow. And if you are checking, if you are looking for where the dollars are going, that's it right there.
One of them.
Yeah, one of them.
One of the many, several places that
including
the
food.
currency goes.
And that's the most heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's the most heartbreaking.
Including food.
Oh boy.
And there are those who say that, look, what is it about phones that we can't produce? There's absolutely nothing that is inside a phone that we can't do, including the technology of it itself. There's absolutely nothing. Let me not go there.
You're going to start that conversation.
I don't want to. Let me just pause it.
Okay, let's just leave it there.
Let's just pause it right there. Right beside the nameplate, Buhari reverses Seplat's purchase of ExxonMobil assets. I'm wondering what that means. It's confusing. Right.
How did they get to approve it in the first place? What led to the approval?
There are advisors around the president. Okay, the presidency, including the office of the president and the office of the vice president. There are advisors. It's an economic issue. So it's something that's right there constitutionally under the purview of the vice president's office. The question you want to ask then is, what happened? Anyway, details you'll find of that story on page 15. And right under the pictures, one of the stories under the picture, over 100 bandits, drug suppliers arrested in Kaduna within 6 months. The details of that you'll find on page 7 of the paper today.
And from there, let's take a very quick look at leadership newspapers this morning. And there's some stories that you cannot ignore on the front page of leadership. Let's take a look at the big story first. 2023, Tinubu will be on warpath over supporters' utterances. The riders provide more insight. Call them to order. APC presidential candidate tells LP flag bearer. Says Biafra obedient members are birds of a feather. It's height of mischief to link my supporters to separatists, says Obi. Pope hasn't told me to reject APC campaign DG appointment. We've gone through that before. That's attributed to the governor of Plateau State.
Is that to say, if Pope says reject it, will they go ahead and reject it?
Reject it.
What are they always talking about? Why did they say these things?
You said, it's politicians,
Search
right?
me.
Can we just move on?
No, but we have to question some of these things.
Plateau. Let's move on,
Can we
gentlemen.
just move on, Chamberlain?
Plateau governor's emergence has pacified northern pacified northern APC Christian stakeholders. Okay, just beneath the nameplate, the sub-nameplate, NAF kills terrorist kingpin Shanono, 17 others in Kaduna. That's cheery. But there are two headlines above the nameplates that we cannot ignore. And the governor of Ebonyi speaking, he says, FG can't borrow 1.1 trillion naira to meet ASU's demands. Well, Nigerians will need a lot more convincing in that regard. We heard not too long ago about how the federal government approved the purchase of vehicles worth over 1.1 billion naira for neighboring Niger. And not too long before that, 1 million naira was handed out as a donation to the Afghanistan government. So what are we saying here? And lastly, Nigerians must be very careful as some viruses are still spreading. This one is from China. Dozens infected with new Langia virus in China. That's the leadership newspaper.
Can we just keep it there?
This morning.
And curtail it right there in China so it doesn't go anywhere else?
If wishes were horses, right? Okay, take a look at News Direct then. That's the next one. Seplat's ExxonMobil deal. Buhari orders investigation into alleged $100 million bribe. So, there you go. Look at the writer. As president backs deal's rejection by regulator. So you just wonder, so how come it was approved? What was the regulator doing before this approval? Did it get to them that the approval was going to know? was going to go ahead? When did it get to them? How could they have missed it in the first place? If they missed it in the first place, what's their role then?
In the first place, did the president have the legal authority to, I don't know, what's the word now, approve something that there is an organization
that
mandated
ought
to do
have
just
approved. You know, I asked that question in a different way earlier on. Can he superimpose his own regulation on, you know, an MOU that had already been regulated by a regulator?
Okay, well, is that in consideration of who the Minister of Petroleum is?
Well, he is the Minister of Petroleum, yes, but he is a minister, not a regulator.
And the President and the Commander-in-Chief.
Yes, this is not a security matter.
Different designations.
This is
there.
investment.
So, yeah,
as Commander-in-Chief,
that office controls all those things.
Yeah, perhaps we may need to take a closer look at the document establishing the NUPRC, so for us to see where the grey areas are.
Okay, there you go. That is it with News Direct this morning, which ends a look at some of the dailies here today. We will be back in a moment. Stay with us.
The March 28th terrorist attack on a passenger train in Kaduna State was one incident that put the entire nation in shock and mourning, particularly regarding the number of fatalities and casualties that were recorded in the incident. 8 people were killed and 62 others kidnapped by the terrorists, who have since released the hostages in batches, beginning with the managing director of the Bank of Agriculture, Alwani Ali Hassan, followed by another set of 11, a set of 7 victims, as well as another set of 4 and 5 victims. It's a breath of fresh air for these new set of 7 victims who were released on Wednesday after spending 135 days in captivity. Among them is Abubakar Garba, who is the son of the former military administrator of Kano and Benue states. Major General Idris Garba Abubakar was kidnapped along with his wife and 4 children.
Having spent 135 days, we regained our freedom. It's overwhelming. I'm happy and at the same time saddened because I left good people back there. 65 of us boarded the train in March 28, 2022. And we have good people, innocent people, people that hard-working people. They left their wives, they left their families back here. I was lucky, I was privileged to have my family back there, though it was traumatizing, but then at the same time, we would like to plead on the federal government to please sit down and dialogue with these people.
For this member of the negotiating team, Tukuru Mamu, the health condition of the freed victims and the remaining ones in the forest call for urgent action by the federal government.
I think it's a very important milestone in this effort, which indicates that there is no reason for government, for example, to waste time in negotiating the release of these people. There is nothing more than preserving these innocent lives, more so in a situation whereby their lives is visibly in danger. So I hope and pray that government will do as much as possible, to ensure the release of the remaining captives as soon as possible.
So far, a total of 37 kidnapped passengers have been released by the terrorists, while 27 are still in captivity. Mamu believes the federal government must intervene as soon as possible to get them released before it's too late.
Welcome back. Well, yes, Mr. Bonlu Adegboro, our senior advocate of Nigeria, joins us next. We're going to talk about a number of issues, largely legally speaking. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today on the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, yesterday, while I think it was 2 days ago, right, Chief of Defense Staff, that briefing that he had concerning those that have been arrested, and then thankfully we've seen some more people released from the kidnappers then. And there was a bit of confusion as to what the specifics were, who was to do what in terms of coordination. And it appeared as though, is there something I missed there? But perhaps we'll come to that. If you could start with giving us your impression about how the coordination, the efforts are, and how we are addressing this challenge, this terrorism challenge that stares us in the face in the country.
Well, maybe the best way to say is addressing a digital problem with an analog mindset is the situation we have. I listened earlier when Mr. Makinde said we have laws that cover virtually every aspect, but the problem is enforcement. There's been a lot of effort made by the National Assembly to address issues relating to terrorism, insurgency, and general violence through various legislation that have been enacted to address these issues. The latest of which, of course, is the Terrorism Prevention Act of 2022, just enacted in May of this year, where detailed efforts have been made to address and coordinate and synchronize issues relating to terrorism, banditry, insurgency, and such other acts that threaten the existence of our nation. But of course, the challenge always is implementation, because by that law, the National Security Advisor is being placed at like a brain box of coordinating security and also counterinsurgency. And so he's supposed to have a center within his office that would regulate the activities of the intelligence agencies for the purpose of gathering intelligence. Because the effectiveness of the security of any nation is anchored upon intelligence gathering. In most cases, it's about prevention. That's why that act is titled Terrorism Prevention Act. So once you are unable to gather intelligence that will inform you ahead of time that so and so will happen or likely to happen, and so you take steps towards prevention, that nation is in some challenge. So as we are presently, that office is not coordinating in the way that the law has set it up. We're supposed to have, just like INEC, when election is being conducted, you see this situation room that is set up where you can monitor what's going on in what local government, what's going on in here. And then we say before an hour, election results are out. So we're supposed to have these coordinating centers in probably all the states of the Federation, reporting to the National Coordinating Center, being coordinated by the National Security Advisor. But that's not in place at all. I don't even think the law is being implemented in any way at all because it's new. We're all used to the Terrorism Prevention Act of 2013. which is still what most security agencies are familiar with. So I think there's need for education and enlightenment on the part of the government in terms of bringing the latest developments in crime prevention, in intelligence gathering, in line with the new law enacted by the National Assembly. Otherwise, we're in a situation whereby we have sufficient law that will regulate these activities, but they are only in the paper. They are only in the letters. Implementation is still a challenge.
Which then now poses a much greater challenge. You cited the Terrorism Prevention Act of 2013. Information available says there was one in 2011 that we upgraded in 2013. In fact, I even see another one saying there was one of 2019. Whether or not that ever saw the light of day is another matter altogether. But just as you have said, it's important to note that there is such an office as the Counter-Terrorism Office, just as you cited earlier. And so we were, speaking behind the camera, wondering, in fact, one of my colleagues there wondered, wait, is there such an office indeed? As you said, the information about these things are scarce, few and far between. The question then is, it's been about 10 years since we had that office, the counterterrorism, based on the 2013 law, or the 2011 law. How come we seem to have an increasing level of terrorism acts or activities despite having such an office? Is it for funding or for political will, which I've heard and I'm clearly tired of hearing? Or what exactly is the matter? How come we have such an office 10 years down the line, we're still having these issues?
We're a nation living in denial. And that denial is simply that security cannot be a federal issue. We have to look at the Constitution and take away security from the exclusive legislative list. Because this is at the core of the crisis we're having in the country. The issue of security has been centralized. Only the federal government can legislate on it. Only the federal government can formulate policies on it. But the violence happens in the local areas. The terrorism is happening in the forests, which is outside of the control of the federal government. So you see a system that it's centralized a particular policy, but the implementation then has to be within the regions, within the zones. And the governors are powerless. The people being affected by terrorism, the people who are in a position to really stand up and fight it, have no power to do so. You saw the governor of Ondo State lamenting and weeping during the Owo massacre when he was attending the federal service. He said, we know what to do. We have human beings, we have the capacity, but we don't have the power. There's no enablement. So the first thing for the National Assembly is to come to the realization that you can't regulate security at the central level. It should be taken away from the exclusive legislative list. And then the counter-terrorism system should be, deconstructed in such a way that it goes back to the regions, goes back to the states, goes back to the local government areas, and they have capacity to be able to address this. So long as somebody sits in Aso Villa, calling himself National Security Advisor, and says, I want to set up a counter-terrorism center where I can monitor what's going on in Zamfara, what's going on in Delta, that's not possible.
Is it a function, or is it a problem of the laws or the problem of the structure? There are those who date back this centralization to the post-1966 coup, and consequently everything has happened by way of a unitary or authoritarian style that we seem not to have been able to transit from 56 years down the line. So is there, because there are those who are still wondering, we tend to still be operating our democracy or our politics like it's some form of military or central system as opposed to a decentralized one. What would you say to those who say that, look, our democracy is too central because we are yet to wean ourselves from the military, history?
Well, if you look at the Constitution, Section 2, Sub 1 says that Nigeria shall be a federation consisting of states and the Federal Capital Territory. And so that federation then means that you have a central point that takes from the regions, but the power should belong to the regions. That's a federation. But in that same constitution, as you go down the line, you see the federating states losing their powers to the center in terms of security, in terms of economy, in terms of resources. So you create a federation that is run through a unitary system. And it's not strange to us because it was Abdusalami Abubakar that brought the constitution. And it was a product of the military. And so they still have that centralized system where there's a body in Abuja called National Judicial Council that pays the salary of judges in states and appoint judges in states. You have a system whereby you want to regulate admission into even private universities, even state universities, by a body called JAMB, sitting in Abuja, dictating cutoff marks to universities that is not funding. So we live in theory to say we're a federation, but in practical, we're on a unitary system of government.
How much
and so long as that persists, these problems will continue.
How much of the powers do the states lose to security? Because we know that almost in every state you have one form of policing structure or the other, like that the neighborhood watch, the traffic control units, whichever name they call it. But yet we still don't find, there's still certain things that are missing. So if they can set up those agencies, can't that have some impact security-wise?
No, there's no security without arms. When you talk about the effectiveness of a security agency, it's its capacity to control arms. The lethal weapons, the firearms. Under the Firearms Act of 1959, imposed on us by the colonialists, only the president has power to grant license for arms. Any form of arms at all. And all manner of arms have been prohibited. You can't hold any weapon as you are, as a private citizen, not even as a governor. Under the Firearms Act, everything is prohibited absolutely. So the president will now use his discretion to determine when to grant license, even for Dane guns. So you have that system where Lagos State has neighborhood security watch, very effective within the neighborhoods. But unless there is a gun, the armed robbers don't fear neighborhood watch who only possess uniform. And the same thing with Amotekun. You had the governor of Benue State setting up his own security agency, but without weapons. And they can combat terrorists. So when you talk security, you're talking about effectiveness, and it has to do with weapons. So as long as you centralize that system whereby only the president can grant license for firearms, then you are not ready to address the issue.
You know, that raises a lot of questions as to the proposal to carry, for people in the states to carry firearms. But let's come back to the Terrorism Act. As a follow-up to Ayo's question, if the Terrorism Act promulgates the death penalty for someone found guilty, and 10 years down the line, when we have the Kuje jailbreak, we have Boko Haram suspects who are said to have, you know, escaped amid the jailbreak. What's the problem around prosecution? What are the loopholes there, such that is it a political will to, you know, go the whole hog with the Terrorism Prevention Act? You know, I hope you catch my drift.
Yes.
Yeah.
But purely, you see that under our system, Section 174 of the Constitution gives the Federal Attorney General powers for prosecution of all criminal offenses, terrorism, insurgency, kidnapping, whatever it is. And he has the power to institute those proceedings. He has the power to discontinue them. But you now see that under the Terrorism Prevention Act, the National Counter-Terrorism Center is also empowered to set up a legal team that will assemble prosecutors, assemble experts to more or less also filter intelligence and determine whether offenses are committed. So you see the duplication of powers in that regard. And so there is a challenge as to who has the power to prosecute, for instance, because DSS now file charges in court, which is not supposed to be so. I've seen lawyers from DSS attempting to prosecute insurgency in the Federal High Court.
How is it supposed
when
to
there
be
is a living Honorable Attorney General? The Attorney General is the chief law officer of the Federation. Whatever you do it through that office. He will delegate his powers to prosecutors within the DSS. He can delegate his powers to EFCC. He can delegate his powers to ICPC. But when you have a situation where agencies struggle with the person who is authorized by law, then it becomes a problem because he can't coordinate them.
Can he delegate
And so,
his
for
powers?
instance, you see that there's a Waduman who has been arrested, you know, and we hear he's been charged to court, but you don't hear anything about it again.
Just a quick one on that. Can the person empowered by law delegate his powers?
Oh, yes. It's even there in the Constitution, Section 174, that the powers of the Attorney General can be exercised by persons working under him or to anybody he has granted fiat or delegated the powers
So
to.
could that be the reason why that happened, the DSS?
No, the DSS filed their charges in their name. They are not acting under the delegation of the Honorable Attorney
So,
General.
for instance, the our church attackers who have been arrested, whose jurisdiction is it to prosecute? Would it be the police or the DSS?
He's the Attorney General of the state, Ondo State.
So, if we were to delegate his powers, which
He could
agency
delegate
would
the
it?
powers to police, he could delegate the powers to DSS, or even private practitioners. We've had cases in which EFCC, when they have very, very serious cases, they call on lawyers, senior advocates, senior lawyers to assist them in prosecuting those cases. And that's what should be, in fairness, because the government can do everything.
Just a quick, this is perhaps a small one. We deliberated over this yesterday. Who has the authority to parade suspects?
Nobody has the authority to parade the suspect under our laws. And you know the word you use, suspect. So the Constitution then says that every person is presumed innocent until otherwise proved guilty. So that presumption of innocence includes that you shouldn't create a sense of bias against me in the public. Why would you parade me, for instance, if at the end of the day I'm vindicated or acquitted of that charge? There's a guilt hanging on the head of that person already in the public domain. Whatever ammunition you have, whatever arsenal you have, marshal them in your charges, in the proof of evidence, and march the person to court and conduct a quick trial. It's either he's convicted or he's acquitted. The parading of suspects in the media is totally unconstitutional.
So whether or not,
absolutely unconstitutional.
Whether or not we blur their faces or they back the camera.
It doesn't matter how you do
Even
it.
if it is done by the police.
Even the police has no right to parade suspects. You don't have such right at all. It's against the Constitution.
No, well, still on this terrorism, because if we don't deal with security, I was it the president that said if we don't deal with, okay, that's corruption. If we don't deal with corruption, corruption will deal with us. I want to use that in the space of security. If we don't deal with security or insecurity is going to deal with us. So about this, anti-terrorism law and all laws around security for the nation, for states, for citizens, and all of that. Do you see, you've talked about the fact that we lack that coordination of the laws from the Office of the National Security Advisor. What needs to be done? We're building to an election, the general election at that. And what normally happens is in the build-up to the elections, there is usually that hike in insecurity and all of that. What needs to be done now to protect lives and property and ensure that people they don't just feel safe, they are safe indeed, by law and by whatever other means?
First of all, I'd like to appeal to you to refrain from repeating this phrase by the president to say that if you don't deal with corruption, because corruption is dealing with this regime presently. This regime is sinking in corruption. So that phrase is now anachronistic. It's no longer relevant for us. It was when the president first came and he was using it to buy public acceptance. For now, we now know that in Nigeria, corruption has dealt with the Buhari administration. You saw that Jolly Yame and Dari were just released recently. After a court had convicted them of corrupt offenses. So let's not even reference this administration in terms of corruption. Buhari is not fighting any corruption at all. Now, having said that, the challenge we have with security is the same that Jonathan had. After Buhari came into power, we saw this scandal about the Office of the National Security Advisor, money being used for election. It's still the same thing. It's until Buhari leaves office before you see the scandal. Security has become the main means of siphoning funds for us in our nation. You want to buy Tucano jets, you want to buy all manner of things. Humongous amount of money is going under the table every day in the guise of security. The governors have so much money. For instance, in Lagos State, about ₦1 billion.
For what? For security vote?
For security. It's a security vote. And it's not, you don't account for it. You don't know what the person is doing with the money. So for me, the challenge we have to get the governors, the federal government, and the people who represent us as our leaders to perform the primary function of securing lives and property is for us to get the will to challenge them. What are you doing with the funds? So long as we keep quiet, this will continue until 2023. And maybe after 2023, when we have Tinubu or Obi or Atiku, then we continue this circle and this story will continue.
So how then does that line up with what the Vice President said recently to the military, that they should account for security expenditure?
Well, for me, when you make these statements in the media, you just then know that there is a problem. Because the Vice President is an internal person, so he should know what he's saying. So for him to say that should show you that there's a lot of problem going on within the security agencies. And so until we get to a position whereby the National Assembly can assert their authority over these security agencies, we'll just continue in this circle.
So how do we approach that? I mean, if he says that he'd like to see more accountability with military spending and things like fiscal transparency, does that then suggest that we probe or look into the activities? Because they always tell us when it comes to security issues, we have to be careful how we look at them, because you have several other people who are looking inwards to take advantage of whatever information they can against us.
I think that for me, the National Assembly is the one appropriating funds.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be used for security or any other purpose. And there are committees of the National Assembly that should be supervising these agencies, Navy, Army. So those committees should constantly interface with these security agencies to know what has happened to the fund that's been appropriated. You claim to buy so and so. Can we see it? Are they being used at all? So if the National Assembly is up and doing, we won't have this problem about people just every day sitting in office and then we cannot confront the challenges of terrorism.
How do we, the people, make the National Assembly accountable in that regard? You know, because we've had a lawmaker in time past say that even the National Assembly, some National Assembly members are corrupt, that they are the beneficiaries of certain contracts, you know, from agencies, departments, and parastatals.
The media, under Section 22 of the Constitution, the media is to bring government to account to the people. Then the CSOs, that's why they exist. It's like an alternative opposition. Otherwise, if you have a country where there's a ruling party and then there's a viable opposition, these discussions are to be taken up by the opposition political party. And I must commend SERAP in that regard. Every day, that agency is constantly calling government agencies to account, especially on economic matters and misuse or misappropriation of funds. So the media should regulate these agencies by investigating. And then the civil society organizations, the activists. I mean, that's how we brought Nigeria to where we are. Everybody should be up. But this country, this scenario where everybody is afraid or everybody is compromised, you are either a politician or so, it is not unacceptable. Our colleagues should stand up. The NBA, the media organizations, the activists, lawyers, file suit, challenge people. Let's get our country back from politicians. Enough of this.
Talking about politicians, does that then put a question mark on our leadership recruitment process? If the people who are in office to do a job are not doing it? I know that that's taking us to electoral matters, but does that put a question mark on the process?
Surely. I mean, if you look at the process of bringing leaders through the primary elections, you will see that by 2023, our problems will probably have graduated in double proportions. Because virtually everybody who's emerged now, they didn't emerge through the will of the people. There are allegations about people buying candidates, allegations about primary elections being upturned. And now we have a new regime where the National INEC says we don't even recognize elections monitored by our state recs. So that process is being bastardized. That process is being compromised unless we insist that the will of the people should prevail, especially when there's an election.
Well, speaking about the states, what they can do in terms of security, some say that, look, that the IGP or the state governors can apply to the IGP for maybe not automatic grade weapons, which the law allows, Dane guns and the likes. And the IGP can actually issue licenses for those states. Can that happen?
Oh, I believe so. If there is understanding, if there is collaboration in terms of effective policing or security, there's no reason why the governor of Lagos State shouldn't have access to the Inspector General of Police to get light weapons, double-barrel guns for neighborhood watch, or even for Amotekun in the other states, or even for the southeast or south or the northern states. It depends on the collaboration between the government. So if there is seriousness in fighting insecurity, for instance, it shouldn't be a problem for a governor to obtain license for agencies set up to fight security. But you see that this thing is purely politics. The IG will not grant the license.
But
it's
only Zamfara and now Benue that have taken such step. So we're waiting to see what the feedback will be, because we haven't heard any state say we applied for as Dane gun, which the law permits, and we were denied. So up until that happens, can we then say that, look, they're playing politics with it?
When I say playing politics, it's to the extent that there's no difference generally for me between the governor of Lagos State and the Inspector General of Police. We always say that the interest of the masses is not at the heart of our leaders. Otherwise, if there is a governor who genuinely has the interest of the masses at heart, if he applies and he was denied, he will come back to his people and say, this is what has happened. But you see, for instance, if the governor of Lagos State applies for license and the IGP denies, he won't say anything. I can tell you that. He won't come back to you to tell you so. Because he has ambition. Because his loyalty is not to the people. I'm telling you the truth. So you don't then think that you have a governor who probably is ready to fight the battle of security on behalf of the people. He's thinking about second term. And he's responsible to people who are responsible to other people. So
that means we should expect Governor Trump to tell the country if he's denied.
Oh, yes, he should.
He's not seeking for second term.
He should. Is he not going to Senate?
Mr. Aderugurua, your quote of the Firearms Act earlier touches at the heart of the matter, because in recent times, the helplessness of the security situation has compelled commentators to call on Nigerians to help themselves. And if Nigerians want to carry as much as a Dane gun or something beneath that, maybe a cutlass, just to feel secure, but they have to go through security checks. There is a conflict of interest there. The average Nigerian now wants to protect himself. How can we help this kind of situation?
No, it's not necessary. The burden we put on the people is totally unnecessary. Because Section 14 of the Constitution says clearly that the reason why we all collectively ask some people to represent all of us is because we can't defend ourselves. There's not much I can do against a criminal or an armed robber who is armed. There's not much I can do. But we have collectively decided to be paying taxes, collectively decided to elect certain people who gave promises, and then they get to office and then the man is sleeping. I mean, we're on May 15, or May 29 rather, 2015, the president mounted the rostrum and said, I will lead the battle from the front. He's been sleeping in Aso Rock since then. He's not leading any battle. The governor of the state, Katsina, where the president comes from, every day is crying that the entire state is being taken over by bandits, to the extent that the leading convoy of the president, when he was to go on break, was attacked. And nothing's been done. We've not even arrested the people who attacked the bodyguards of the president, how much less Ayo or myself. So we have already given this mandate to people to exercise this responsibility. So we shouldn't push it back to the masses. Let the president stand up. Let the governor stand up and defend the people. They have the resources. They have the willpower. They have the law. Look at the Terrorism Prevention Act of 2022. So elaborate.
Well, we'll take a look at
They
some
should
of
put the
those.
interests of the masses beyond their own selfish interests.
We'll take a look at some of those provisions as we move further in just a moment. Join us again. Welcome back. Well, listen to the NSA. He says, well, it's not shifting the responsibility, but he did say time and again, it's a collective responsibility. So to that extent, is that to say that we all can't play a role in this?
No, unfortunately, I mean, it's like talking from both sides of the mouth, with all due respect. He says that Nigerians are tired, and that is the truth of the matter. We keep hearing stories. When these things happen, immediately a press statement will be released, and then security chiefs will be summoned, and that is the end of the story. And I think I've been following your presentations day after day on these issues. And the major point made by most contributors is to the effect that nothing is being done. Nobody is being held accountable. I mean, a prison was attacked. The President's Brigade was attacked. Nobody is being held. Nothing is being said. It's just something happened and then there's silence. So that's the reason why it keeps happening. And there are allegations that people who are responsible for this are in the government. They are close to the president. They have capacity. They have the opportunity to be able to use their positions to sponsor these events. And so it's like a government that is controlled by bandits, for the bandits, and the interests of the bandits, unfortunately. Well, otherwise, by now, what people say is that since the attack on Kuje, at least, there should have been somebody held responsible.
Okay, now, there is one of the efforts that people make to protect themselves is, I mean, when government can't help them, it would seem, they try to resort to some form of self-help. So this whole kidnapping for ransom thing seems to have caught the attention of this Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act of 2022. Section 21 of that law, talks to that. The subject of it is financing of terrorism. And it says a person or entity within or outside Nigeria in any manner who directly or indirectly and willfully provides, solicits, acquires, and so on, funds or other services or attempts to provide such with the intention or knowledge of having reasonable grounds to believe that it will be used in full or in part to finance a terrorist or terrorist group and all of that, commits an offense. So essentially saying anything that has to do with kidnapping for ransom is prohibited by law. No. What do you make of this?
What I make of it is that in an attempt to grapple with a particular problem, you don't then duplicate the efforts, because kidnapping is a common criminal offense that has been addressed by most state legislatures. In Lagos State, there is a law addressing that in particular. And I think the same for most other states, where now they try to impose, some say death penalty, some say life imprisonment. So what it means is that that is already a matter that's been covered by the states in terms of attempting to address the menace of kidnapping. So to that extent, that Terrorism Prevention Act is only now limited to the FCT, because you cannot apply that in Lagos State. So
generally, or with respect to kidnapping?
To kidnapping. It can only be limited by law to the Federal Capital Territory, which the federal government has control of. Because you can't legislate for Lagos State or other states common criminal issues relating to kidnapping, armed robbery,
but the law does not use the word kidnapping, though. It uses the
word kidnapping for ransom.
Yeah.
That's what it says.
So wait, if they kidnap for ransom and then with intent to even kill the person or cause grievous bodily harm, is referred to as common kidnapping.
Oh yes, and can only be enforced within the FCT from the promise of that law.
But perhaps it's in the document now, even though there's a replication in other laws in other states. But perhaps it's in the document now because these crimes go hand in hand with, terror suspects and their operational approach. Hence, the need for it to have a unique approach to prosecution.
The concept of terrorism is that a message is being preached. This is what makes it different from common crime. There is a motive, there's an agenda. It's either you are rejecting a particular policy of government or you want to force a particular agenda on government. And so you terrorize them. You take hold of government equipment, you seize a train, just to say, for instance, you don't agree with particular. But for kidnapping, it's a local crime. And it's purely for financial benefit in most cases, to demand for ransom.
What if the person,
so that's the difference.
What if the person who kidnaps one is a terrorist and he kidnaps a person requesting ransom? So on that, what will that fall? And secondly, if the person or if people pay ransom to terrorists who they know that terrorists who kidnap whoever, can they be charged for financing terrorism?
Well, there's that controversy when this law came out. I mean, the person who is wearing the shoe is the one who knows what he's feeling. You can't criminalize the efforts of families who are victims to rescue their people. Look at the trained people. The Abuja-Lagos trained victims.
Abuja-Kaduna.
Abuja-Kaduna victims. Families are raising 100 million naira every day to get their people out. So whatever anybody does to rescue his person alive, you can then criminalize it. Because you cannot shift your failure to me, and then I'm trying to assist you to get out of that, and then you then punish me. Because the responsibility of bringing a victim out of the den of kidnapper is that of the government. And if you can't do that, and then families are making efforts to be able to get their people out, you can't then punish them again, because that's double jeopardy. I've already lost somebody who is in custody. That's a punishment for me as a family. And then I make effort to get the person out through my own self-effort, and then you want to punish me again. So it can't work.
But the law is already law.
Sorry.
Well, law has to conform with public policy. A law must be rational. And that's why you see the court setting aside laws every time for one reason or the other, if it's not well thought out. The purpose of law is that it must be practicable. There's a law in Nigeria prohibiting multiple marriages, but it's an unreasonable law. And so people marry themselves here and there, and you can't. So the law has to be reasonable.
Senior advocate, if the Abuja-Kaduna terror attackers now, trained terror attackers, are arrested, would they be prosecuted on terrorism charges?
Oh yes, surely.
But they kidnapped.
Oh yeah, maybe like you said, that kidnapping is now, like I pointed out, for a particular motive, and that we already identified these people as trying to overhaul the government. They're trying to overrun the country, to say we want a particular set of ideas imposed on others. So any other thing they do in furtherance of that motive will also be related to terrorism.
So other terror suspects in the past had been kidnapped, but it didn't lead to that ultimate signing of the death warrant. We still have them in the prisons and they're escaping. What is militating against signing that important death warrant? I mean, it will serve as a deterrent to others who are being recruited into, very quick and fast, into bandit gangs.
I think that it takes us back to the issue of culture. I think the governors, more or less, have that milk of kindness. And we have seen virtually in all states, they are willing to sign death warrant to execute. I mean, look at Reverend King, or the one in Lagos State here. The conviction has been affirmed by the Supreme Court so many years on now, but and that's not only all over the country. So we've tried to look at the reasons behind it, and we think it's cultural. A person doesn't want to put his hand to say, I'm the one who asked that so and so person be killed. But governance is about responsibility. It's one of the responsibilities of the office of the governor that he has to exercise that right. And if you don't want to execute them, then you don't keep them in that state of indefinite suspense, because it's also amounting to torture. because we investigated and discovered that they keep them in separate sections. Those who have been sentenced to death are in different compartments in the prison. So early in the morning, around 5 a.m., they go near the door of their cell to listen to the footsteps of the guards, because they take them very early in the morning before anybody knows and take them to the place where they will either hang them or shoot them. So you imagine somebody waking up every day expecting the hangman, and he's been there for 10 years, he's been there for 15 years. So at a particular time, the former president of the NBA, Dr. Lisa Gbakoba, went to court on behalf of some of these condemned convicts who are not being executed, to say that it amounts to torture for a person to be waiting for the hangman for 10 years. And the court found in his favor in that regard. So I think the governor should excite that.
What about religion? Perhaps the governors are not willing to sign
I think
so
it's
that
also
they don't
part of
inflame
it.
passion.
Yes, culture and religion are part
the law is the law.
Of course. And as a governor, you already took the oath of office to discharge the law without fear or favor, without ill will or affection. So you just have to be man enough to take those responsibilities.
What are governors permitted to do under the law with respect to perhaps persons who are being shipped from one place to the other, who are then suspected to be used to carry out nefarious activities, perhaps including terrorist acts? So can the same law that applies to a citizen apply to those persons if they suspect they're foreigners?
Well, it's a very delicate situation. And delicate in the sense that in the Constitution you have the freedom of movement, that no person shall be restricted to move from one state to the other. You can from here get up today and go to Kano. So you can't do a blanket restriction on that particular right because it's constitutional. But at the same time, the intelligence agencies can then take up the kind of exercise that's going on in Lagos State, where the governor is trying to determine the status of citizens by asking us to come and register. There's a particular agency now that is in Lagos State asking citizens to come and take a particular card to be able to determine what is your status, where do you stay. So when you get those people who are suspected to be foreigners, you need to interrogate them and investigate, for instance. But you can't do a blanket ban on movement of people because it's a constitutional right.
What about language, senior advocate? A bandit is typically a robber who is an outlaw belonging to a gang. But in line with the Terrorism Act, as we have defined earlier, is somebody that unduly compels a government to seriously intimidate a population, to destabilize or destroy political, constitutional, economic, or social structures of a country. That's just defining it briefly and loosely. Haven't we reached a point where we should stop referring to those marauders who have overrun Nigeria's northwest and are pushing further down south? Stop referring to them as bandits and start designating them appropriately as terrorists so that it can also aid prosecution should it get to that point?
Yes, not just prosecution, but also the international community have different treatments that they assign to these organizations. If you are designated as a terrorist, for instance, maybe you don't have access to visa or you don't have access to certain opportunities or privileges here and there. So it is correct to say that you don't give kid gloves to treat a terrorist by referring to them as bandits. It's important for government to be able to give proper designation to these terrorist agencies so that the law can easily capture their status, and then the international communities can also relate to them. But when you have a situation where the state, maybe in Zamfara or so, they said a particular leader or gang was given a coronation or a chieftaincy title, and up till now nothing has happened, either to the person or the person who conferred the title. So I think that this issue of religion and culture is also affecting.
And he said to be a wanted man on the police wanted
list.
Oh
yes.
But we saw a policeman standing behind him.
Oh yes.
While that event was going on.
Oh yes. So there is no political will, in fairness, and that's the point that's been made every now and then, that the government is not willing. Not that it lacks the capacity, but it's not willing to confront the insurgents.
But isn't it equally tricky for for media, for instance, to properly designate those people? Because much as the government has designated, I think, a group or two as terrorist groups, especially, for instance, we don't know what's the name of the group that is carrying out different kidnappings in different parts of the country, especially when they don't take responsibility. How do you then properly designate such people?
Well, for me, generally, the government is responsible for that designation. It's prescribed some organizations in the southeast, also in the north. So long as that prescription is on, anybody carrying on activities similar to those ones that have been prescribed, you give them the same designation.
As terrorists.
Because it's in the same series. I mean, if you prescribe IPOB, you prescribe Boko Haram, and you know what they do, the unknown gunmen or whatever it is. So when activities like that happen, every now and then, you just give them the appropriate designation.
Speaking about certain laws that are loosely drafted, yesterday we took a look at Section 115 of Electoral Act 2022, and the SAN was suggesting that, well, he thought that some provisions were loosely drafted. So what would your interpretation be about that Section 115 when it has to do with candidates in political parties?
I think that the National Assembly has a responsibility to go back and look at the Electoral Act and clean it up. I must commend the initiative of the 2022 Electoral Act. It's helped us to sanitize the electoral process in at least electronic transmission of results and taking away human intervention in most cases, so that has helped us, looking at Ekiti State and also Osun State. But there are a lot of provisions in the Electoral Act that needs to be redrafted because we are all human beings. So I think that the events that have happened since the promulgation of the Electoral Act has shown that the things that they thought they wanted to capture, they were not able to do so. So the responsibility of the legislator then is to go back after that first election, and then also that of Osun, and look at those sections, Section 29, Section 84, Section 115, and then come up with an amendment that will suit the purpose and the intention for which they thought they wanted to address. Because as it is now, issues relating to double nomination, it's caused a lot of confusion. Because I think that what they had in mind was to say, you shouldn't stand as a candidate in multiple elections. For instance, you don't stand as a candidate in presidential election, and then when you lose it, you go back home and fall back to become a senator or a senatorial candidate, as it were. And if you lose that, you then fall back to become a candidate for House of Assembly. But when you look at Section 115, it didn't come out exactly in that regard. It talks about nomination in the same election. Yeah. So people then give it different interpretation to say presidential election is different from senatorial election. So long as it's not the same election.
And they say if I'm an aspirant.
Yes, it's different from a candidate. Yeah. But I think that, if you look at the commencement of Section 115, the real beginning of 115, what it describes is a person, any person. Any person. If you look at the commencement. So the other subsections would then take their interpretation from that general description, any person. Then any person will include an aspirant, it will include a candidate. That's the way I look at it. But of course, lawyers are entitled to give different interpretations.
But then again, since it touches at the office of most National Assembly members and their survival, do you think they'll be willing to begin initiating the amendment?
It's a legacy. It's a legacy. And that's why everybody is commending the National Assembly, because for this Electoral Act, we owe them that commendation, indeed, that they made that effort. But now that that effort is subject to confusion and multiple interpretations, they owe us a responsibility to ensure that before the 2023 general elections, they clean up this thing and come up with an Electoral Act that will meet the intention. And I think the intention is that you shouldn't allow people to risk or be prostituting. And when you try presidency, it doesn't work, the governor will run back home and try center. They should come out clearly and state it like that. They owe us that responsibility.
Okay, we'll look to see how they approach that moving forward. But we have to thank you for coming on, Mr. Ebonlo Adegboro, our Senior Advocate of Nigeria.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
We'll be back in a moment to get some backstory concerning, remember all those gold medals, world record-breaking performances. That's what we're talking about next. Stay with us.
Records were made and broken. Africa was impressive, but Team Nigeria made a loud statement.
Gold medal.
Star girl Toby Amuson continued her fine form from the World Championships. Amuson ran a new games record of 12.30 seconds to win gold.
You know, it's been good. My coach and my support system, they've kept me grounded, and once I'm healthy, it's just, the rest is history.
Miss Consistent Aso Brome also produced a record-breaking performance.
So happy, you know, for Toby Amusan. Before I came here, I tapped from her grace, and I prayed, and I said that God, you, the same God that gave it to Toby, the same God also is going to do it for me, and we'll together celebrate. And here I am today. Here we are today, celebrating together.
Atmosphere is filled with so much energy and excitement, and the people are willing to do some more. So we're looking forward to see how this progresses.
Go lo, let me see you. Go lo, bugao.
From powerlifting to weightlifting, back to track and field, Team Nigeria were phenomenal.
When I came here yesterday saying we're going to win this, I wasn't playing because I know we all have what it takes to win, and I'm not sure we did it, and I know you guys saw it. Not just breaking the record, but also passing the message, like I said before, and yeah, we got it done.
I'll keep it next to my face. I won't kiss it down. Next year, we have Worlds in Hungary, so I'm hoping to make my third world team and then also make the finals and be able to showcase my talent and get a medal as well. I think it would be, I don't know the last time a Nigerian or even an African kind of medal for women's discus in the world stage, so I'm hoping to do that and have that push me forward for the Paris Olympics.
Team Nigeria, brilliant. We saw them in the opening ceremony and we were cheering them on, so yeah, brilliant.
I've been supporting Team Nigeria, believe it or not. Nigeria and Pakistan, two teams I've been supporting. And yeah, I've been watching them closely. And I think they've done a good job this Commonwealth Games, I would say so.
Lights, fireworks. It's a wrap on the 2022 Commonwealth Games. It was a record-breaking performance for Team Nigeria, but some problems were also exposed. The country must find ways to solve those problems and consolidate on this sort of performance. From the Alexander Stadium in Birmingham, Austin Okonakpan, Channels Television News.
Well, yes, Tony Bitoye, press attaché, the Team Nigeria for Birmingham 2022, joins us next to give us some scenarios that played out whilst there. Good morning, Tony. Thank you for joining us on the program today, and good to see you. Now, well, clearly, our best performance since our debut in 1950. And, wow, what a scenario. We saw, at least from what was going on, but you were right there behind the scenes. What was the experience and the narratives that went on behind these great feats that Team Nigeria achieved?
Yeah, thank you so much, Chamberlain, and the other guys for the opportunity to be on Sunrise Daily. I've missed being on this show for a while, but I'm happy to be here and to be on this show. So thank you for the opportunity you've given me to be here. Yeah, you said it all. Birmingham 2022 was an outstanding performance for Nigeria. Team Nigeria broke all the records. set new records, achieved such incredible performances, and for a long time, this is going to be the talk of the town. You know, it's really remarkable. And I think it's a combination of factors that have led us into being able to do what we were able to achieve in Birmingham. The athletes were fantastic, they were disciplined, they were very focused, they worked hard, and of course, we would also have to give a lot of credit to Mr. President, President Muhammadu Buhari, because his intervention allowed us in the first place to be at the Commonwealth Games. If not for the presidential intervention, we probably wouldn't have the funds to be able to go to the Commonwealth Games. And what an investment it has turned out to be, because if we had not gone, we would have missed out on what we achieved, the best performance ever. So on all sides, from the federal government, to the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports, to the Nigeria Olympic Committee, to the sports federations that participated at the Commonwealth Games, to the athletes themselves, they gave everything. And that's why we have such brilliant results to show.
So what sticks out for you in terms of the training regimen of these players, and who contributed what, and how did we approach it?
Yeah, you know, for the first time in a long while, we had to rely on a lot of data to be able to pick the 9 sports that eventually went for the Commonwealth Games. We went with just 9 sports, and the reason why we went with 9 sports was because there was a lot of work by the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports through the federations and elite athletes department, the FIT department, in finding out exactly where our areas of strengths were. And so we settled on 9 sports, and it will interest you that out of those 9 sports, we had medals in 7 of them, and we got to the semifinals in the other 2 where we eventually didn't get medals. That's table tennis and judo. We had athletes who got up to the semifinals and lost out in the bronze medal game. So it was so close, we probably would have had all 9 sports having medals. And of course, the planning was in stages. There was a session for open camping for the athletes who were based at home. And then they had competitions. The wrestlers, for example, the boxers, for example, had a lot of competitions. And so they had an open campaign. And then close to the games, we had what we call a closed campaign, where all the athletes going for the competition will be together and then put finishing touches to their preparation. So it was a combination of all of these, knowing our areas of strength, picking those sports where we had the advantage, those 9 sports, athletics, boxing, judo, wrestling, weightlifting, table tennis, para-athletics, para-powerlifting, and para-table tennis. Those 9 sports that we went there to the Commonwealth Games with turned out to be a massive success for us. The weightlifting was amazing. The wrestling, we were picking up the gold medals and the medals left, right, and center. The same thing with powerlifting. You know, so it was a combination of a lot of work behind the scene by the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports in identifying those 9 sports, identifying the top athletes who are in the top 10 in the world, and then getting them to be adequately prepared to go to the Commonwealth Games and then achieving this kind of results. It would amaze you that we went with one of the smallest contingents in recent times, and this small number of athletes have eventually turned out for us into producing our best performance ever in the history of the Commonwealth Games. So I think it's a combination of factors, from Mr. President giving his intervention, and then the Ministry of Youth and Sports, the Nigeria Olympic Committee, and the sports federations that went to the Olympics, working together, being on the same page, and achieving these amazing results.
Well, whether or not we can make this small contingent that you talked about a template for future performances or participation, well, I guess we'll see over time. But, you know, no achievements comes without its own challenges. Are there things that, you know, we could have done better? Of course, we always say, you know, there's always a room for improvement. Our reporter was saying the other time that, look, there were some problems. And there are some that you want to talk to us about, and which people or agencies or individuals that you think need some talking to or some amendments or adjustments in their operations so we can have better performances going forward?
Absolutely, absolutely. You can always do better. There will always be opportunities, and you will always review your performances. Yes, we are celebrating that this is the best performance ever, but could it have been better? Definitely could have been better. We could have had probably better funding. I talked about Mr. President taking a big share of the praise for what we achieved, because it was his intervention that helped us to participate. We didn't have the funds, but Mr. President intervened and provided the funds that eventually saw Team Nigeria to the Commonwealth Games. So the first person that we should praise and commend for what we achieved in Birmingham is Mr. President, President Muhammadu Buhari, for his intervention. We could always do with better funding, and that's what the Honorable Minister, Sunday Dare, and the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports has been trying to preach, that, look, a time is coming, and it's obvious that government alone cannot continue to fund and provide all the resources for sports. So we need to get the private sector involved. And I hope that before he leaves office, the Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports will be able to bring into operation the National Sports Industry Policy, which provides an opportunity for private sector funding for our sports, because we can always do with more funding. We could also do with better communication between our federations and the international bodies, follow up very closely on what the changes are in terms of the rules of competition, because the interesting thing about sports is that the rules are changing every day. So you need to keep abreast. We need to do a lot more in terms of training our coaches, in terms of training our officials to be able to respond to the changes that are going on globally. Because if with what we've been able to achieve, we are still there, I mean, keeping abreast with what's going on, you can imagine what more we'll be able to do. So for me, these are some of the areas that we need to work on, the areas of funding, the areas of being able to keep ourselves abreast with changes, with the new rules, and then upgrade our coaches, our administrators to be able to respond to the changes in sports. These are some of the things that I believe if we work on, we'll be able to achieve greater success. Because not just now that we've done well at the Commonwealth Games, we have to build on this momentum going forward. Next year, we have the African Games. In 2024, we'll have the Olympic Games in Paris. So there are competitions coming in quick and fast. The Toby Amosons of this world, the Ese Brumers of this world are at the top at the moment. But you and I know that getting to the top is tough. Staying at the top is tougher. So we have to ensure that we put all the resources available to these athletes and ensure that we are able to keep them at the very top going into future competitions. We can be happy with what we achieved in Birmingham. We are right now at the top, but we have to do a lot more work now to stay at the top going forward.
Well, I think that also raises a very, very interesting thing. I mean, the first thing you talked about, the sports industry bill, fantastic. But everyone is in business to make money. With the stranglehold of government, if you're asking the private sector to come in, great. But with the stranglehold of government, influence of government, and unpredictability sometimes, if I dare say, of some government policies and all, how safe will it be? How cordoned off, how protected, how insured will an investor's investment be in sports if they are not sure of what will happen should a government policy torpedo just because they put their money into the business?
Well, that's a challenge. That's a challenge that I hope we can overcome. And all of these issues that you have mentioned are also factored into the sports industry policy. We have to be able to provide incentives for those who will want to invest in sports. We have to be able to give them, as the minister will call it, tax holidays. We have to be able to provide infrastructure. We should invest in infrastructure. We should provide an environment that will make them to thrive, because clearly it's obvious to everyone that we have to change the way things operate. Government is carrying a lot already, and they just cannot continue to carry everything. We have to find a way to encourage the private sector to come in. So it's in our own interest that this sports industry policy comes into force. Right now, it is almost at the final stage because it has gone through a lot of processes, fine-tuning and all of that, so that at the end of the day, the private sector operatives, the private sector will be able to look at the documents and see what it offers them, what kind of protection, as you said, it offers them and encourages them to also come on board. Because, as you said, I mean, you are absolutely right in the fact that you are in business to make profit, you are in business to make money, and you identify with what the entirety of Nigerians will love to be involved in. And for me, that's sports. Sports cuts across ethnic divide. You don't think about where the gold medalist is coming from. You are not bothered about his or her religion. You are just interested in this athlete going on to win for Nigeria and put smiles on our faces. So we have to be able to protect those who are going to be investing in sports, provide them with what they need to get involved, and then see how it goes. Of course, as we go on and as we try, we will see new problems. We'll keep solving those problems and putting those structures in place until we are able to have a document that is near perfect. I don't know if there's any perfect document anywhere in the world, but we can move as quickly as we can to having something as near perfect as possible.
And you know, Mr. Bitoye, you also talked about the athletes, you know, being the smallest team that you've taken to the World Athletics Championship and the Commonwealth Games. You know, so even in your narrative, I can tell that you're only being optimistic. You're saying we have to be able to see to it that private sector investment is protected. But do you see that attitude in all these agencies that are in charge of building up these teams, the attitude that this document requires for implementation, such that when you're going next to, you know, another championship, you have a more expanded team and more chances for this harvest of medals that we have seen?
Yeah, yes, I'm being optimistic, but I'm also confident that if we continue with some of the programs and initiatives that are already in place, and we are able to sustain them, of course, you know, hope that when this administration is gone, the next one coming in can follow through those programs, then I have hope that we'll be able to achieve a lot more. And one of the reasons why I said this is because of some of the programs already in place. The Adopt initiative for Ese Brume, for Tobi Amusan, for Blessing Oborodudu. You saw Blessing, you saw Ese winning medals at the Olympics. Yes, they were already established athletes before the Adopt initiative. But you know, when an athlete is an elite athlete, he also needs a lot of support structure around him or her for training, to go for competition and all of that. And that was what the Adopt initiative offered some of these athletes. It was a program that was brought about by Sunday Dare, the Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports. And Tobi Amusan was adopted by the Ogun State government, Ese Brume by the Delta State government, and a lot of other corporate players adopted individual athletes and provided funding for their trainings, for their competitions, for their coaches, which, I mean, played some role in helping them to get prepared for this sort of competition. Going forward, sports federations have a lot to do in terms of identifying their elite athletes. And then, as I said, we also have to find a way to get support for these elite athletes to go for competitions. Let me give you an example. The weightlifters that were picking medals freely at the Commonwealth Games had gone for a lot of competitions. The wrestlers are going for another competition in a few weeks from now. So they have to consistently go for competitions like this, and there must be support structure of funding to ensure that they're able to go for this kind of competitions on a regular basis. And when you go for competitions and you meet some of the best athletes in the world, you are able to gauge your level and know what you need to do to be at the same level with some of these best athletes in the world. And when you are able to do that, then you are in the game. Because when it comes to the top athletes in the world, sometimes the difference between a gold medal and a silver medal is so small, little attention to details will make a lot of difference. And that's what we have to provide for our athletes so that they can continue to compete at the highest level.
You know, it's good to see that we chose our strength in those games, and we went there and did a lot better ever since our debut in Auckland. But what are we doing about other games, other sports. So, I mean, unfortunately, squash couldn't get anything from there because you can't even get a good old place to go and play squash peacefully. This country has Lions private facility that is top-notch, world-class, like glass courts and things like that. But that's an aside. You know how I like to talk about some of those. But are we looking towards saying, this, yes, we're good here and we hope to keep improving, but the other games that were not right there, because when we go for the African games, those games will feature. What template are we trying to adopt or do we consider for those other games?
I know, Chamberlain, I know you're a lover of squash, and I know you sponsor a lot of squash tournaments, so let me encourage you to keep supporting squash and sponsoring squash. Perhaps someone will come out one day and be able to compete at the highest level. There were some other sports that wanted to be part of the Commonwealth Games because they are also top-ranking sports in Africa and somehow around the top bracket in the world. Swimming, for example, had a few swimmers who are also trying to break into the top level. We also have badminton, where we have a lot of African champions who wanted to break in, and some other countries that even had less talented athletes were still able to turn up for the Commonwealth Games. We have a lot of other sports where the federations are doing so much, their presidents are doing so much. You have hockey as well as doing a lot, and a whole lot of other sports doing well. The challenge, as we've always identified, is we must be able to provide a conducive environment for these sports in terms of funding them to go for competitions. The hockey national team went for a competition not too long ago. Volleyball also the same. We have to be able to provide infrastructure. It is key for us to be able to provide infrastructure. Chamberlain, I have some good news for you. In Edo State, there are some fantastic world-class squash facilities that the Edo State government provided and were used for the National Sports Festival the last time. So we have to begin to make use of these facilities, discover talent from early on in their lives, expose them, and then you never know. You never know. What God does is that He puts talents in people, in personalities. What we have to do as a government, as a ministry, the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports, is to provide an environment where those talents can be discovered and exposed, and those athletes can then compete at the highest level. That's the challenge for us. But we have to keep trying. Yeah. We have to keep working hard. We have to keep encouraging these federations to keep pushing. And I believe one day they will become like the weightlifting, the wrestling, the powerlifting, yeah, that got us medals at the Commonwealth Games.
Speaking about wrestling, it was high hopes. Yes, we got some medals, but look at Canada, for instance. They've been the best performing teams in this kind of games for a long time. And I know that Delegate was back home doing a lot of training and things like that. What kind of impact did we get from all of that? Are we looking to say, look, what is Canada doing that we need to learn or topple?
Delegate is an Olympic champion, yeah. So he knows what it takes to produce champions. So I think we need to give him a lot of kudos. Other federations like weightlifting also, we need to give them a lot of kudos. Boxing. I was surprised with boxing, for example, because I never knew we could get a lot of our athletes into medal positions in boxing, but they did well. I think Delegate and those federations have given us a template on what to do. And the challenge for us is that the likes of Odunayo Adekuroye, Blessing Oboro Dudu, Mercy Genesis, who got us a lot of these medals, we now have to start to discover and find replacements for them from the young ones. Bayelsa has become like the home of wrestling because that was where our athletes camped for the Commonwealth Games, and that's where they always camp before they go for international competitions. And we have to look at the areas of strength. Bayelsa, for example, for wrestling, Delta State for athletics, Lagos State for boxing. Begin to look at the comparative advantage of all of these things and bring them to play so that we can begin to discover young athletes who will take over from some of these established ones who have done Nigeria proud for so many years. One day they will have to stop. And so when they stop, there shouldn't be any gap. We should get some other ones coming to fill in immediately.
We do that segmentation you just analyzed now for the economy as well. But I can't but mention this one, Mr. Ibitoye. It would seem like you had more women winning gold than men. I'm sorry, I just have to go there. I mean, it's a cheering thing, right? I mean, that happens. We've been advocating for, women empowerment and all of those things. But is there something of concern there? If there was a balance, there wouldn't be an issue. But 29 women performed at this event, and almost all the women who, won gold. Almost all the gold came only from the women. So is there a reason for that, or is it something that you did in the background that we didn't know about? Is there a reason for that? I'm just saying.
I think for me, the summary is that we have to appreciate our women a lot more. The women are the carriers of the nation. So we have to give them all the kudos for what they were able to achieve at the Commonwealth Games. But let's not forget as well that there were moments in our sports when the men carried us. So it's now the time for the women to do the same, and they are doing it so brilliantly. The women were amazing. But let's not push away the men. They gave their best as well. Perhaps the competition is a little tougher on the side of the men. They have to play a lot more qualifying games, unlike the women. But there was a time that the men carried the nation. Now, the women are carrying the nation. And for me, the combination of the men and the women is what made Team Nigeria. Yes, we appreciate our women. We really, really must commend them for what they were able to achieve. But at the same time, let's not forget that there was a time that the men carried us. And I believe that very soon, both the men and the women will still be able to lift us to greater heights.
Yeah, and if you look at that graph, the performance of Team Nigeria at the Commonwealth Games right from Auckland, where, how many did we get in Auckland? 0. Oh dear, in 1950 we got nothing. But then here we are in Birmingham with, wow, look at that, the highest of them all, 12 of them. So that is indeed a very, very good one for Team Nigeria. And I guess we'll have to go back and revisit the federations, look at the templates. I think it's only natural for them to say, you know what, we have to allow a lot more women to head those federations and ensure that we'll mix it up. I mean, if for a long time we had the men give us glory, now the women are giving glory, it's only natural for some of the men to back off and let those opportunities come through so we can just have a little mix all over the place. After all, we call it what? Team Nigeria. But Tony Ibitoye, we have to thank you for coming on today and for the good work. Everyone who is involved in this goal really have good works for you. Thank you very much, Tony Ibitoye, and all the best.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you, Channels TV, my home station, and everyone for the support you also gave us. Austin was fantastic in Birmingham as well. We were moving everywhere together, and I'm enjoying all the reports that I'm seeing on Channels TV. So thank you for the opportunity.
And there's more to come, by the way, so keep it locked here. So let's take a look at some of the messages. Well, today on the program, the president got flack for not doing enough for security and got a lot of praise for doing enough for sports and Team Nigeria. So that's balance right there. That's fair.
And it would seem like I'm not alone in that argument about women.
Go ahead.
Polycarp Agubolom says about Team Nigeria's performance, it is remarkable that all our gold medals at the Commonwealth Games and the 2 medals at the World Athletics Championship were won by our women. The men were nowhere to be found. Well, that's not completely correct, but hey. Even in other sports, I have observed that lately our good performances have come from only our sportswomen. Does a man have business being the Minister of Sports? That office should be left for our women. It's Polycarp, not me.
Thank you very much, Polycarp, for your submission. And Ayo, please don't be a killjoy. Let the women enjoy their year of fame.
I'm just asking
and questions. Let it be said that the women were outstanding when they led the team. All right, so let's move on to Pastor Law Alpha Cross, who is also talking about Nigerian athletes. If Nigerian athletes are adequately supported, the country can be sure of more medals. kudos to the ladies for showing we men how champions are made.
Well, Pastor Law Alpha says, if Nigerian athletes are adequately supported, the country can be sure of more medals.
I just read that
Pastor
one.
Law? Oh, okay.
I just read that one.
Then this is from Comrade Diary. Okay, Comrade is in the house today. He says, the issue with Nigerian sports, everybody's talking about sports, is efficient management of skills. We have all it takes, even in the World Cup, but management of those talents is where the problem is.
Deep Call Deep says Nigeria's sports industry policy must return to the front burner. Hashtag adopt initiative. Can we have a list of the adopters and adoptees? Tony Bitoye says you have to mention some names of the private sector adopters too, not just Google government and Delta government.
And by the way, we appreciate everyone, Team Nigeria, who was there. We don't intend to dampen anyone's psychological makeup, so well done to everybody. Yeah.
Well, that's the program today. Have a wonderful rest of your day and keep the flag of Nigeria flying. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Thank you indeed for sharing your day with us. We promise to be back with more spice. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
Spice. All right, I'm Chamberlain, so goodbye.